Around maybe 1 or 2 years ago, I began getting recommended videos about how games now just are not fun, or how games that used to be fun, like Minecraft, no longer are. The videos did to some degree resonate with me a lot, because while I did enjoy gaming, and still do, as someone who grew up playing the older Minecraft, the game sure does not give me the same kind of innocent fun that it used to when I was a kid. But in the end I knew that it was just my childhood nostalgia, and with how the modern AAA industry was looking, I assumed that while I would continue having fun with games for many more years, I'll probably not have much more of that same childhood fun and nostalgia again. Or at least that was until a little bit later in 2022, when I got the same innocent fun playing Elden Ring, my first Souls-like, and when I finally purchased a Quest 2 and got into VR and experienced Into the Radius. Into the Radius was and is by far my current favorite VR game, by a long shot, and that's despite me playing games like Call of Addicts. For a while I've struggled to figure out why I exactly find it to be my favorite, until I heard someone say the quote, "some of its parts." Nothing about its individual parts are the best, like the gunplay, survival mechanics, open world graphics, etc. But it was how it was combined to create it, and it was good enough for me to sink in about 70-ish hours. So Into Radius has a really special place in my heart. But the game overall has many, and I mean many, different flaws and setbacks, and could be easily improved on so many different ways, which is why I got really excited when they in December last year announced the sequel, and the developers were very open on Steam in many different devlogs about what was going to be included and what was not, and how they were progressing, and I really appreciated it. And now here we are, the sequel has officially released in early access. Is it worth the $40 it is asking? Yes. But there are some problems, and most importantly, things missing. For example, there are much less guns in ITR2, much less attachments, no armor or helmet, no melee weapon, no hunger system, no weapons degradation system or repairing mechanic, no shooting range, just 2 regions, only 2 types of enemies if you don't count the different variants, no grenades, no headlamp, and probably much more. Furthermore, a big and constant issue is how the VR body and rig often doesn't match up with you in real life, making it very difficult to grab magazines or equipment from your chest, and even if it does match up, it is often difficult to grab your backpack or tablet. So yeah, the game is not perfect, but the main problem is just what's not there, and that for day 1 early access release is probably the best problem for you to have, because when it comes to the technical side, which often is a major problem, I personally had basically no problems. I do get a slight dent in my performance when I do record, but it's still pretty good, and when I don't record, it runs much better than the original. But the important thing is, what is in the game is not only good and not only better than original, but so good that it for me kind of makes the old one obsolete and less good. So let's get to why Into Radius 2 is a really fucking good sequel. The graphics and visuals are definitely the first major thing you will notice, and I don't know how much there is to say. The textures have gotten a big update, the lighting a even bigger update, and even the radius itself looks so much better. But there are more things that they have done to make it look even better. First of all, the game's color pattern has changed from grey to more of beige, grey and green thanks to the added foliage, which is also much denser in this game, and I greatly prefer it. It's also the same regarding how the world is full of so many small details that improves the environment and feel, like how ammo boxes open up and other details when loading a magazine, and so much more that you may not notice but yet you can feel. The biggest individual change would probably be the spawn and the mimics that are in the game, and the new designs look way cooler and also impact the gameplay in a positive way, which I will eventually get to. I'd like to add that the death animations are really cool and also acts as environmental storytelling, showing you how the enemies are just artificial beings created by the radius. But what might be the game's biggest improvement is the sound design, which has, in my opinion, improved basically everything from the last game. The first one you might notice and the biggest upgrade is the weapon sound, and I'll just show you the difference between the starting pistols. As you can probably tell, the new guns sound devastating compared to the old games. But it also fixes something that always bothered me. If you had a fully automatic weapon in ITR1 and tap fired it sounded alright. But if you held the trigger in automatic, the sound would just change and sound much worse. And this doesn't happen now. Anyway, like I said, the improvement also applies to basically everything else, from your footsteps, to anomalies, loading a magazine, to the sounds the items make when dropping them, and many more that you will miss just because how subtle they are, but still make a significant improvement. The one thing I do prefer in the older games is the old voice lines the mimics would make, because the new one... yeah, they're not that good, but I like the idea of them sounding more military and radio-like. But I think they could and should change the voice lines. But I think I yapped enough, so let's actually get into the important thing. The first thing I'd like to discuss is exploration, which to me has always been important for making me like ITR1, and ITR2 does it well. That's maybe mainly because of the new map system, i.e. your tablet. When I saw the trailers and first began playing, I thought it would just look cool but be cumbersome and not that usable. But it just works, and it does so well and naturally. It makes the old map almost seem bad because of how well they implement the tablet, allowing you to zoom around the map, and I think it improves the exploration, which is also benefited by just how massive the maps, or in this case, map is. The peninsula map is alright in size, but the forest, Jesus Christ, in my 15 hours of game time, I still haven't come close to exploring all of it, and it just makes the exploration for me much more fun than original. But important to exploration is the artifacts and anomalies you will find. This has had a massive improvement from the original, starting with how it tackles the equipment. In the original, you had to have the detector, and while probes were not mandatory, they were still basically needed if you did not remember the anomalous pattern. But here they have made it so that while it's recommended for you to have the equipment, you don't need to have them in order to find artifacts. Instead of the artifacts magically showing up when you use the detector, there are always seeable things in the world that require different solutions in order to get. Some are encased in a jar requiring you to shoot, some you can just grab, and others need a shining light. Notice how no one requires you to have the detector, which now just guides you. To make sure you don't need to have the probes, the exploding chair anomalies are always visible, and the other anomalies that are not visible make distinct noises so you can always avoid them. Why I like this so much is because what would often happen to me is that I would forget to bring the equipment or lose them in the middle of an intense fight, and then I just couldn't grab the anomalies or do anything. Apart from all this, they also made changes to you, the player. Your new Explorer is a lot similar and also different to the previous one, starting with the rigs and backpacks. You can now choose between dozens of different rigs and multiple backpacks to match what you like, but what might at times impact you the most is the movement. First of all, the running to me feels much faster than before and also lasts longer. When you get heavy enough, you will move more slowly like last game, but just the amount of speed, so your stamina will still be at the same, and they also made it so holding your primary makes you slower, and I think that adds a nice risk and reward effect for choosing not to have your weapons ready in order to move faster. They also added jumping, which can be useful at times, but at least for me, I think it's cool, but not really that massively impactful. And with all this laid out, let's get to what people might think is the most important part, the combat. But before I start praising, there are some problems, or problem. There's a lack of enemies to fight and weapons utility to use. But again, it's day 1 early access, and I still think there are enough weapons and attachments to satisfy the average player for the moment, and the enemies that remain are so much more improved now. For starters, they look 100 times better visually, but also in a way that positively affects the gameplay. The mimics, like in the original, come in different variants, from police to military, etc. And they all have different weaponry and thus are different in difficulty and gameplay. In the original, they at least to me basically looked the same, and you couldn't really know what they were until they started shooting it. But here, they all look really distinct from each other, so you can always know what and who you're up against, and thus plan accordingly, or act more precisely if it goes wrong, which it often does. Another thing about their design is how they have orange glow, which for one matches with the radius and acts as visual storytelling, and secondly, it makes it possible to spot them even at night, but not too easy. The AI has also gotten a big improvement. Granted, they're still kind of stupid like in ITR1, but still they feel much more intelligent, with them more often flanking, taking cover, leaning, and also firing on where they saw you last time. The second enemy is the Spawn, which has received a massive change in the looks, and in my opinion for the better. Their new looks makes them harder to spot in the foliage, and thus makes them harder in difficulty and overall scarier. Their AI has also improved, with them now moving much more sporadic and faster, and also being harder to dodge. You can also more often find them inside houses, crawling on walls and ceilings, like spiders that we often call them. And that's all I have to say for Inter Radius 2, as this has been a very quick video, more of a early impressions video. I do want to say that $40 is skirting the line between being too expensive, but I've said it multiple times. This is a day one release, and they had been very transparent about what was not going to be in the game and what was. And I actually think they over-delivered what they said they would. So that's why I think it's a really good game on its own, 2, a worthy sequel, and 3, a overall good example of early access done right.